Hello, and welcome to Post Games, a podcast about why and how we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant, and I am so happy to have you here. This past spring, I found myself without a job. I knew I wanted then to make my own business, and I knew the name, Post Games, but I didn't know what it would be. So first, I planned to write a newsletter. You see, I've built a career on writing, so I figured, why stop now? Doing my due diligence, I chatted with lots of experienced newsletter writers, and I learned their unified secret to success. Break original business news every week that serves a high-paying audience of insiders. Which I am just, frankly not good at. There was no way in hell I could compete with my peers, so I crumpled up the newsletter idea and I tossed it in a bucket. Then I wondered, Post Games could be a consultancy business. I have 20 years of consuming, analyzing, and contextualizing the trends of the video game industry. I called a few friends in the consultancy business, and I learned about their very exciting lives traveling the world, writing deep dive reports on the minutia of free-to-play revenue models. And that wasn't gonna work either. I'm not good at being away from my family with any regularity. Math is my personal hell, and a quick Google revealed that I would be competing against not merely individual consultants, but like a half dozen super experienced and well-funded firms. Crumple that one up, rubbish bin. After that, Post Games was briefly a YouTube video series, scrapped, a Twitch channel, much like lol, and for a hot moment, a brick-and-mortar vinyl record shop that would sell only video game soundtracks, which don't even ask. Fortunately for my time and my sanity, Post Games was all of these things and none of these things within a single week. As lovers of art, there is this instinct to encourage people to chase their, quote, true vision. But art as a commercial product requires compromise. The Renaissance artists painted all those beautiful biblical images, not because they were fanatics, but because that's what their patrons wanted. To create something for an audience requires you to consider who is and isn't in that group. Which brings us back to the video games, which is why we're all here. Every video game designer must now consider this balance, not when they release a game, but in the earliest moments of creative conception. I am no Renaissance painter, nor can I muster a single line of video game code, but I can relate, in some small part, to the stress of having to decide how much of a creation is for you, for your teammates, for your audience, for your investors, for your sponsors, and for anybody else that pays your bills. After a week of Post Games being anything and everything that I could possibly want it to be, it solidified into what you're listening to right now. A weekly interview show that makes sense of one of the countless, fascinating, confusing, beautiful, or horrific corners of video game culture? That sounded great to me, and I hope it sounds great to you. Because we are going deep into one of those corners. This week, I have an expert on this very topic. Simon Carless is an expert in helping game creators strike a balance between the artist vision and the audience interest. Carless is profoundly knowledgeable in the exponentially important research of game discoverability. Now, if you are a listener who is here every week, you will know that this is part 2 and the final part of our little mini-series on the too many games problem. Last week, we focused on how the too many games problem came to be. This week, we hear how creators and consultants are adapting to make sure the best games reach you, rather than get lost at the bottom of an ever-growing pile. So, this week on Post Games, saving great games from the infinite abyss. Act 1, the art of game discovery. Act 2, do endless sales help or hurt gaming? A Patreon bonus segment, Simon sticks around to tell us about some of the truly bizarre and audacious methods game developers use to get their game seen right now. And Act 3, as always, the news of the week. But let's not waste any more time because who knows how many great games will be released between now and when this episode ends. Let's get to it. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. What do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. You're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup, just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Act 1, the art of game discovery. Simon Carless, I will admit, doesn't have the mainstream name recognition of iconic video game directors, but his impact on video game culture is no less significant. Across his career, he has done so much for so many people. He was the executive vice president of the Game Developers Conference during its colossal growth from 2011 to 2020. He was the publisher and editor-in-chief of GameDeveloper.com and Game Developer Magazine. He also oversaw the now-defunct Gamma Sutra, where he took a gamble on me, providing me my first regular byline nearly 20 years ago, and so many other writers too. He began his career before that designing games in the 90s, and these days he invests and advises on them. His current focus is Game Discover Co., the agency that he founded in the thick of the pandemic, though you might know the name better for its newsletter. He and his team use data and proprietary tools to track sales, trends, and interest on both PC and consoles. In short, today's guest saw the exponential increase in games hitting the market not in 2025, but in 2020 and earlier. More importantly, he's been helping game creators prepare for this moment ever since. How many games do you estimate are released each month right now?
So nowadays on Steam in 2025, there's about 1,500 games released on Steam every month. And if you compare that to, Steam Direct, Steam Direct started, I think, in mid-2017, and it was about 600 games a month. And if you go back, the start of Steam Greenlight, which was 2012, were really only about 25 games a month. So it's really gone, 25 games a month on Steam 2012, like 500 to 600 2017. And now we're up 1,500. But more importantly, it's not really necessarily about the amount of games per month. It's about the cumulative nature of those. Some of the games that came out in 2017 are still excellent and still selling. And that's really what you're competing with, the entire back catalog of these digital platforms.
What is game discoverability and why does it matter?
So game discoverability is, at a very high level, how people find out about your game. People can't buy your game unless they know about it. So how do they get to know about your game? That's sort of the ultimate problem. But it sort of extends past that, and it extends into things like product market fit. And I'm actually a fan. It's not used too much in video games as a phrase, but I'm sort of a fan of the phrase product market fit, which is, I think, really maybe a tech industry phrase, because you really are talking about nowadays, is this game that people will light up when they see it? Is it intrinsically attractive to them when they check it out? And so for me, a lot of game discoverability is, if you see a video of this game for like 5 to 8 seconds, are you immediately attracted to it? Or do you not know what it is? Or are you not immediately attracted to it? That's a lot of discoverability as a starting point. There's also a lot more about, how does this game even get in front of you in the first place?
Yeah. Now, when you describe that, it sounds to me like very subjective and hard to pin down, but you have tools to help people wrangle this. What sort of tools have you created to help people with game discoverability?
So, as a starting point, a lot of our tools, we can't necessarily change the discoverability of a certain game, but what we can do, we have a pro product that we license to a lot of developers and publishers and some platforms. And so we're really scanning all console games, but also every single unreleased and released Steam game. And we have data on it. We have data on its tags. We have data on how it's trending. We estimate how many wish lists it has. You can't get that information directly, but there's some indirect data that will allow you to work out how many wish lists the game might have. And so we're really looking at what's trending. I just posted on LinkedIn, actually, on my LinkedIn a couple of hours ago, the trending games, unreleased games on Steam for the last week. So we're looking there at Steam followers, and Steam followers are really just who follows a game to see news about it. But it's quite a good leading indicator of whether people care. And I guess number one this week is Escape from Tarkov, which is interesting because Escape from Tarkov has been a big off-platform hit, a kind of rare non-Steam PC hit, and now it's coming to Steam, and it's picking up a lot of interest. So a lot of what we do, I think, is we don't necessarily solve this problem. I have had 1 or 2 clients who've come to us and said, how are you going to help me get more wish lists? I think that's actually quite difficult to do in some cases, because I believe that in general, games have an innate degree of discoverability, which has been sort of built into their design. But what you can do is give a lot of context into what's popular right now and how your game is doing versus the competition. And also we do some detailed and interesting data where we're looking at public Steam profiles. A lot of people's Steam profiles are public. So we'll just randomly scan a bunch of those and we'll sort of say stuff like, if you played a game, how much more likely are you than the average Steam player to have played another game? That's sort of what we call like affinity. And this is interesting. Obviously, this is fully anonymized and GDPR compliant. We're just randomly looking at profiles. And so we sort of see stuff like, if you played this game, you're more than 10 times more likely than the average Steam player to have played this game. And it starts to give you really good information, I think, on how certain cohorts of Steam players act. So that's part of it.
Let's get into some specifics of that, because I think that will help people kind of imagine this. What are some of the trends that you're seeing right now? Like if somebody came to you and they said, this is not realistic. I'm making a game and I'm going to release it in 3 weeks. But what is it? What is hot? What is cool right now?
Yeah, I'm about to do a newsletter tomorrow on my Game Discovery Co newsletter about simulator games. And by simulator games, I mean the first-person simulators, which have been around for a long time. We're considered, I think, a little low rent, but are quite popular. And games like Supermarket Simulator more recently have really taken them to another level. So I think there's some really interesting stuff going on in the simulator space. And I think sometimes developers can be a little bit, hoity-toity about certain genres, like it's beneath them to do a first-person simulator game. But actually, they are quite easy to make, so maybe that's a reason why you shouldn't try to do it, because there's too many competitors, and then it's difficult to stand out. But what I'm most excited about is stuff that's sort of quite trendy, but then you sort of do a spin on it. Like I profiled a game called Cash Cleaner Simulator that came out recently that was being pretty popular, and yeah, it's a cute game, and you're sort of laundering money for like the mob or whatever, but you're literally like washing money. That's sort of part of the joke. And so, that's great. That's a really fun twist on a certain idea. And I think there's all kinds of games that sort of come along that twists on an idea. You just need to understand, I think, what are the ideas that will initially interest people, and how is your game perhaps a twist on it?
Yeah, just to poke at this a little bit more, you said that vibes play a role in the game's ability to be discovered. What do you mean by that?
I mean, a lot of this is around feel, and one of the problems here is that I think a lot of people who develop video games get very stuck into the mechanics and sort of, you know, like, what are you doing? Like, how do you win? Like, what's the story? And in reality, players actually make decisions to play games based on much less objective or feature-paced things. You know, they're very much like, oh, this looks cool. Like, what's going on here? Oh, this is new. And one thing I do believe in this current market is not enough time is spent thinking about what kind of vibes your game is gonna give off. You know, like the folks at Landfall who do like Tabs and some other games in the space. And also were the co-developers of Peak recently, and Peak's been a massive hit. Like, Peak has excellent vibes. Like, all of Landfall's games have really good vibes. And but what I mean by that is a little bit difficult to describe.
No, I get what you're saying in that there are a million Metroidvania games that people could buy right now. There are going to be a million more released actually tomorrow and a million more after that. Ender Magnolia is a game that came out in February. It is not Hollow Knight. It's not Silk Song. It's not any of those things. But it is a game that feels like Nier crossed with Pokemon. And did I like that game more than all the others? Yes. Do I think it is mechanically richer or has more features than the rest? No. But did it fulfill whatever weird energy I needed? 100%. And for me, I guess that is what I associate with. Same with Peak. It's not like there aren't other games out there doing it. And it is, I don't want to discount it, designed, but there is a feel.
Yeah, and the thing about Peak actually that was quite clever was they did innovate on the gameplay side as well, because they sort of have the climbing mechanism, and they, I think, did a good job of wrapping all of their stats into a single mechanism, but also it's just really goofy, and people love co-op games where you can talk to each other and all the distance-based effects. I think what they're doing, and you often see this, is games that start a micro-genre like Vampire Survivors did. When you saw Vampire Survivors originally, it's not incredibly original Vampire Survivors. There's been previous games, I think, that have riffed on some of it, but it just did it in a very specific way that everyone picked up on. And then I think it becomes a micro-genre or sub-genre. Sometimes people are slow to understand that, and that's kind of interesting because there's actually quite a lot of opportunity if you understand that you should be riffing on this good idea rather than just going out and doing something traditional like a 2D puzzle platform. And that's why I think looking at the market is so important.
What is the biggest misconception about the work that you do as a game discovery consultant?
I think probably that I can fix people's problems. And you know, to some extent, we've moved. We used to do a lot more kind of straight consultancy, and to some extent, we've moved into this kind of data area. Like most of our clients nowadays are people who simply license our data for their company, and you know, anyone can log on and look at our data, and that's because, you know, I think some of the other things you can do as consultants are sort of to, you know, oh, well, this will make the game perform better. I'm a bit of a fatalist. And I generally believe that marketing is very important, but marketing is not in games going to make a fundamental difference in PC and console games. In mobile, it perhaps does because you have a lot of paid ads that you know, monetize, and you have to make sure they're going monetize as well to make the money back on the paid ads. So I think ads are very important in mobile. In PC and console, marketing and ads is less important, and I just think that the nature of the game is important. So I think, yeah, that's sort of the misconception, you know, like it doesn't come up a lot, but I think, you know, the idea that I can come in and say, just do this, and you'll get twice as many wish lists. I think that's what people want, but that's not really how it works. Yeah,
hearing you say it, it sounds like the role that you serve is much more about when you're creating the game early on versus, hey, we have a game and we want to go sell it. Now help us get a gajillion wish lists.
Yeah, I mean, I would love it. I'm trying to move everyone earlier in the cycle is part of the answer to that. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of money spent, oddly, later in the cycle on marketing and PR. But I don't think there's enough money. I'm not just trying to get more money for myself. I just think in general, there's not enough money and not enough methodical sort of scouting of games if you're a publisher or understanding the market. I think people have ideas for games that they want to make, and that's fine. Like, I don't mind if you have an idea you're passionate about. It's just like, do you want it to make money or not? Is this going to be a side project for you? Is this your actual job? if you want to make money, then you have to pay attention to some of this stuff, like genres and how your game's actually going to get noticed, because there's plenty of great games out there nowadays that sell 500 or 1,000 copies, and that's not going to work for you if you're a full-time dev.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, and on the note of setting expectations, I understand the uncomfortable part of releasing a game when 1,500 other games are released on Steam that month is luck to some degree. Like, it is a part of it. How often do you see a game that looks promising, that takes the right steps early on towards discovery, and then it still fails to find an audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it happens reasonably often. I would agree with you, by the way. Luck is definitely quite a big part of it. And I will sometimes see, like, events, people will do like a post-mortem, like, here's how my game was popular. And sometimes I come to the conclusion that they actually don't know. Which is fine, but I think it's always reasonable to say that, like, you could be the 10 of the 1,500 that made a good game, but also it was in the right subgenre, and you may have just randomly picked that subgenre. So yeah, I definitely see games that I think are great that just aren't going to get an audience, and sometimes it is to do with genres. Like I mentioned puzzle platformer earlier, like 2D puzzle platformer, very overcrowded genre, doesn't have a ton of like diehard fans nowadays, and also barrier to entry is incredibly low. And I think barrier to entry is worth thinking about. Like, how easy is it for you to do this? So many solo devs who are students or just doing it in spare time can do a 2D puzzle platformer. It's fairly easy. Some of them may be very good. So yeah, so I think that's the big part of it. There are certain areas where if you're doing a game in this genre, or if you're in a slightly unclassifiable genre, actually, that's often one of the kind of orange or red flags I see. Like, what is your game like? I think people love their games to be unique, but if you're too unique, I think people can't understand you. Then that's a big, even if your game is great, that's going to be a cap on your reach.
To wrap up this segment, I'm going to kind of alley-oop the next. But can a Steam sale or a really steep discount give a game with a poor launch a second shot?
I think discounts always help, but what I tend to see is that you're discounting in general to your user base. And at the time you launched, you have a user base and you have a number of wish lists. And I think what people will tell you is, in general, after you launch, your wish lists go up generally quite a bit, and then they sort of stay static after that. And then, so your wish list number, you can't, by doing a bunch of sales, suddenly double the amount of wish lists, double the amount of people who are interested in your game. What happens is people see your game, they buy it off wish list, and then other people see it and wish list it, and it goes back to that's even. But I think in the end, like, you can make your long tail a bit better, but you're still having the problem that you're fishing in this pool with tens of thousands of other games. So I suspect that discounting is incredibly important, but discounting on its own, I don't think fundamentally changes your success trajectory.
We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk all about discounts and sales and bundles, and the fact that there are not just thousands of games available, but thousands of them on sale for truly ridiculous discounts, and what that means for both the people who play games and the people who make them. So we are back, and a couple of years ago, you published, a friend of the show, Joel Burgess's 7 Rules to Discounting. Number 1 being basically ABD, always be discounting. Why are game developers so eager to discount their games?
It's interesting. Sometimes developers are not eager to discount their games, and I'm afraid I'm the person who has to persuade them that it is a good idea. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to discounts, you're really talking about how are you going to maximize the revenues of your game after it comes out? And you shouldn't go crazy, like that's bad, but you should have a very smart and methodical discounting method. And you see this, I often say, companies like Team 17, quite a professional indie publisher, I often tell people, go and look at Team Games for their discount cadence. I think sometimes they're a little more aggressive if the game hasn't performed so well, since they have a portfolio. But in general, you do want to always be discounting if you want to make the most money. If you don't want to make the most money, then don't do that. But most people want to make the most money with their game. So that's what makes sense. Not a high percentage always, but always be discounted, yes.
Yeah, okay. So on that note of don't go too far with it, the number one question that I have received from listeners on this topic is, why the hell do AAA or quadruple A or 5A games discount their games steeply like a month after release? What is the logic there?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to deal more with, I'd say, games that are more in the AA or indie stage. Like, we do have clients in the AAA space, but I don't talk to them that much about pricing. But what I would say is often there's a lot of pressure around those releases, and they are very, unfortunately, to your point, expensive, $60 or $70 at launch now. So I think these companies are feeling like there's money that can be unlocked, and some of them are publicly traded. So they may be under some pressure. They may be like, oh, we really undershot our goals. Maybe you should be more aggressive with our discounts. I mean, I think it's a bad idea. Just to explicitly say what my advice is to everybody on discounting is, like, when your game comes out, you can have a launch discount if you want, but you should not discount it for another 3 months or so. Then you should put it at 20% off. You should do that maybe 3 times if you're discounting once a month. Then you should go to 25% off, then 30, then 35, then 40, and down from there. I think that's really, from a monetization point of view, that is how you will get the most money. So if some AAA games are being more aggressive, and they are, I think they need to revenue maximize early for some reason. Probably the game significantly underperformed their targets.
Earlier you said if people are in the business of making the most money, they should do the discounts. They should be doing it somewhat regularly. What's your justification behind that? What's the logic?
So there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, on Steam, you may be aware there are things called wishlist notification emails, and I think you get some notes in your client as well. And those appear for any game that is at least 20% off. So if you're less than 20% off, you don't get it. 20% onwards, you get it. I know that a lot of people have given up with their Steam wishlist emails a long time ago because they have way too many of them. But I think, some people have them, and it's definitely very useful to get that email notification. So that's just a practical discovery thing. If you don't discount 20%, you won't get the extra discount notifications. I think the other reason is that, there's a lot of people who are motivated to buy games later on, often, let's say, in quarterly sales. And a lot of the time, those people will pick up a few different games that they were interested in, but they weren't sure about. And they might have a threshold, like for a $25 game, they might be like, oh, I'll pick it up at $15. So I wasn't going to do the 55 for it, but I'm checking it out now and it's got very positive reviews. And people seem excited about it. Or maybe like this new DLC just came out for it, so I can get it cheaply with the DLC attached. So I think there's a lot of people who enjoy discount shopping, and we're not necessarily going to buy the game day one at full price. So that's really what you're doing when you're stepping down the discounts. You're testing people's price sensitivity and seeing when they'll crack and actually buy it. And sometimes it's at 25% off, sometimes it's 50% off. For better or worse, it costs you no more money after release to sell a game at 50% off. There's no cost of goods here, unlike physical, where you've had to pay to print it and distribute it. So this is maybe bad as well, but it just means if you can sell a bunch of copies at 70% off of a game you stopped working on 2 or 3 years ago, it's kind of free money. And that's why people do it.
Okay, I want to push you on the counterpoints, the skepticism. There are hindrances to a game's success when it comes to discounting. We've talked about a few, like going too early or too steep. What is the risk of this abundance of discounts and sales? And let's extend it beyond this, bundles, just this entire culture of reducing the cost of a game.
The biggest risk by far is that people don't buy new games at full price. And I think that is a risk that to some extent is being realized right now. I think, we're still seeing hits, but I do think that if people know that they're going to get games cheaper later, because that's traditional at this point, then why would they buy a game day one? You have to be much more of a fan of the game to buy it at day one. You may just wait for the sale, like you may wait for movies in the theater because it's coming to some kind of streaming service in 3 or 4 months' time. So, yeah, I think if you are just absolutely profit maximizing, that's the way to profit maximize in the short term. But in the medium term, you are undercutting your new titles, especially if you have new games of the same franchise. And I definitely feel that big franchises like Assassin's Creed have suffered in recent years from the fact that they have a whole bunch of other excellent Assassin's Creed games that people might not have played available for, like $20 instead of the new one that is $70. This is a problem. It's not discussed that much in the industry because I think people don't see a way around it. But, you're just building up backlog on 100-hour games that you haven't finished. So I think by far that is the biggest concern around people continually discounting games.
Yeah, that Assassin's Creed point is so fascinating to me because you're right. These games exist. They're effectively just as good. And if you read the reviews, often described as better, because that's the classic review phrase, right? Like, yeah, sure, this new one's good, but I'm more of a Odyssey person. I'm more of a Valhalla person. And suddenly your own reviews become advertising for cheaper versions of your older games. Yeah, that's grim.
Well, it's grim and it isn't. I mean, ultimately, the amount of times I've seen the phrase record catalog revenue in published releases in recent years is hilarious. And to some extent, if you have a very solid catalog revenue, it can definitely keep the company going, I think, over time. And I think especially if you're adding games to that. But the problem is you are going to need some hits in the new games, because if none of your new games are a hit, you won't have built up enough wish list to get a good catalog revenue from them or enough interest in them. That is one of the dangers that comes hand in hand with having such a large amount of games available on PC and console now.
Yeah, the concern over constant discount sales bundles is not new. Jason Schreier, always a good episode when I get to talk about Jason Schreier, the game developer behind Passage, argued back in 2014 that game developers should consider raising their prices as time moves on. Do you remember this argument?
No, but I would say some people do that. They still discount as well, but you will see, especially as games on Steam go through early access to 1.0, like some games will step up their pricing. So it's not unprecedented to do that. Some games will also not discount. Like there are definitely a few games, a handful of games on Steam that are proud that they've sort of never discounted, I think. And even like some are very conservative, like RimWorld, excellent game. I think RimWorld has never been more than 20% off until very recently in its entire history. So, you know, some games that I think are popular enough that they just don't have to discount. I don't think that's necessarily best practice. I think Factorio, famously, is also a game that doesn't really discount. So, yeah. So, I mean, I think here's the thing. In isolation, it's fairly easy for Jason to say that. But, you know, when unfortunately you're competing with everyone else and they are discounting. And also, I don't want to say discounting as a negative. There's many people who would not play your game at all and not enjoy it unless they could buy it more cheaply. So I think it's important to note you're really expanding your market by discounting. There's people who would never have tried it at $30 who might try it at $15 or $10. So I think, you know, there are some positives there. But yeah, I think it is interesting and weird and a little bit race to the bottom adjacent. And I think it's reasonable to admit that it's a little race to the bottom adjacent.
I'm going to hang a lantern here on the other strange ways people are or aren't approaching discounts. But before I do that, I do want to get into Steam sales and demo dumps. How is participating in a Steam sale event different from the usual discount pricing?
It's not spectacularly different. One difference I should point out is if you're in a Steam quarterly sale, they just have 4 of those per year and named after the seasons, then you actually don't have cooldown. And the cooldown thing is you can't discount again for 30 days. So everyone really wants to be in all of those quarterly sales because Steam gives you an incentive, which is you could be on sale again 5 days afterwards and you don't have to wait for the cooldown. That's certainly one reason. A second reason is a lot of people check out these sale pages. So you're going to get people who are not, you know, if you just do a sale on your own, you're just going to get probably people who wishlisted you. And then maybe if the deal makes it to Reddit or something, and somebody might notice. But, you know, on these theme sales or quarterly sales, Steam features specific games at the top of the page, or you might get randomly shuffled in somewhere higher. And then I think it's difficult for people to envisage, but a game we might think is incredibly popular, like RimWorld is incredibly popular. Like the significant majority of Steam players have never heard about RimWorld. So as soon as RimWorld is on the front page or very high up in the sale, there will be new people checking it out. They're like, oh, what is this game? So I think that is the main reason that you want to be a bit more featured, because I think everyone's in their own filter bubble, and it's very difficult for us to understand what all those personalized filter bubbles are, but they can be surprisingly small or narrow.
I want to dig into the one that just truly baffles me, which is the bundle. And the bundle, for people who are unfamiliar with it, it goes back, again, over a decade now. I think Humble Bundle was the one that really popularized this, the idea of, hey, you're going to get like 20 games for, the price of dinner. But a bundle is so strange to me because, one, it splits the money even further for the individual members, and it instantly creates competition for the player to even play your game versus it just going into the backlog. So if you think of like word of mouth and marketing, there is a value in the player actually playing whatever they're buying. Why do developers participate in bundles? What's the incentive?
I think one thing it's difficult, again, when I'm talking about these filter bubbles, it's difficult to work out is the kind of parallel audience kind of issue. And I've been talking about this a bit. So what I'd say is also different types of bundles. Some bundles don't give you a heads up on what games are going to be in it. And therefore I consider those to be a little bit safer, like Humble Choice. You are subscribed to Humble Choice and then you get some games. You're not like, I'm going to buy this because this game was in it and I was going to buy it on Steam and I'm going to buy it in the bundle. So that actually changes it a little bit. And it is true, by the way, the vast majority of Steam games and bundles are backlogged. Like we've done some research on this. And I think, like let's say, I don't know what it's at nowadays, but let's say it's about 250,000 keys, 250,000 players get access to a key via a Humble Choice. That's not an exact number. That's somewhere around, I think it might be. Of those players on an average game, not like a super popular one, only 15,000 players will ever play one of those games, I think. So you're seeing just a ton of backlogging in there. And you can argue that, yeah, this is just backlogging of games that they weren't going to buy and consume anyway. So it's actually not negative. So if you start to look at it like that, you can say, well, only 10% of these players were playing the game. And then only, 10% of those players would have bought my game on Steam. So you're starting to get to like, what am I missing out on here? Like 1,000 sales? And the money you get from the bundles is significantly more than the equivalent of 1,000 sales after Steam's cut. So, I'm the kind of math guy, I guess you can tell, but yeah, doing all the math, it actually makes sense from that perspective. It just depends on when you do it and how much your game costs and all that stuff.
And near the top of this, we talked about not just competing with the 1,500 games that are released this month, but competing with everything, right? That there are still games from 2017 that are eating out most of the hours that people spend playing games. Now, alongside that, we have the rise, or I guess the return of the free demo. The demos are back with a vengeance. Are you seeing full price games or even discounted games competing with this exponential increase of free demos and free games?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I see demos again as, it's interesting. I think what demos stand for has changed a lot. I think demos, when they existed originally, were try before you buy. You try, you see if you like it and then you buy it. I see demos nowadays actually much more as a discovery tool. So what you're doing is you're putting it out there. Sure, you're hoping people will play it, but you're really hoping that influencers will play it and talk about it. That's a lot of the reason why you put out demos, because then if the right influencers are playing it, whether that be YouTube, Twitch, or maybe they're doing excerpts on TikTok or something, then that's really going to expand your reach. And so for me, I mean, you can argue that playing a demo is sort of a competitive thing with just getting the game, but I never really quite saw it that way. I see demos more as a discovery tool. I don't think many people play demos for that long. I think they're very much just like gauging whether they like it. And if they do play a demo for a long time, then that's actually really good. And your game's probably going to sell very well when it comes out. Like Back Battles, I think, was an example of a game that had a demo that a lot of people played for a long time. So yeah, I think I do see it in terms of competition abstractly, but I think, again, this is more about how do you get more people to know about your game? So people should always do demos because that's one of the only ways you get more people to know about your game.
It reminds me a lot of what preview builds were for the press for the past 30 years, which is like, it's a version of it. You get it in front of the right people, and then it's going to get promoted elsewhere. Now you make it available to everybody because, like, who knows who that one influencer is that's going to make your game a hit. So you have to just make it as widely available as possible.
I also think the iteration of your game idea is quite important nowadays. And that's the other reason why demos got really important, because I think some old school developers are used to like, well, we're going to finish the game and then ship it and see what people think. And that's generally not a good idea nowadays, because you have the ability to show build to people at any time, whether it be people in your Discord or multiple public demos. And I think some of the best games that are coming out right now have been heavily iterated. through a multiple demo process. And so that actually makes your game better and more likely to succeed. So that's the other reason why demos have got important.
We talked about the long-term effects on the industry as a whole, on the ability to sell games. Maybe it's good for an individual game in the short term, but having constant discounts could lead to people not buying new games in the long term. And I wonder if you agree that we're seeing that in just pricing in general, because this year there was a whole kerfluffle when Hollow Knight Silksong, arguably the most anticipated game of the year, launches at $20, which for a game of its scale, released by a major publisher, would not be sold likely at $20. Do you think that sort of pricing is a reflection of what is going on, or is that just a very specific single thing that happened because it's an unusual outlier?
I mean, what you've seen in recent years is you've seen some small indie teams make a boatload of money on certain games. And when that happens, all bets are off. Like I mentioned, RimWorld has made tens of millions of dollars. If the creators of RimWorld never want to discount more than 20%, it's fine. They still have tens of millions of dollars. It's very much the case for Hollow Knight as well. I mean, those guys made a lot of money off the first game, so they don't necessarily need to. And I believe the first game was maybe $15, so they were like, "Oh, I'll make it a bit more expensive," you know. So from their perspective, it's fine. But for everyone else who's kind of struggling and doesn't have like 15 million players of their previous game, they're like, "What are you doing here? You know, you're indicating things should be cheaper." I think prices have come down a bit because there's quite a lot more games in the $5 to $15 price range than there used to be. A lot of them are kind of like Vampire Survivors likes or roguelikes, but a lot of them are made by a solo dev or someone who's just fine with that. And maybe they don't have an expensive office in America. They're just working in their house in another country. And so I think that's what's difficult and what will continue to be difficult for the established game industry, which is the middle of the market is getting very much hollowed out. And so you're getting these big outliers, sometimes from indies, sometimes from AAAs. And then the middle of the market is becoming rough because you are seeing, you know, like more than $30. You have to, I think, to release a game for more than $30 on Steam nowadays, it does have to be significantly deep or impressive. And I think that maybe wasn't always the case. But the reason for that is just simply it's really easy to make games now. There's plenty of people making good $10, $15 games, which are just as playable and fun. So I sort of see this, I see this to some extent. I know that for the established game industry, it's kind of scary. But what we're also seeing is we're seeing, you know, so many new flowers blooming in terms of really cool games we wouldn't have got otherwise. Now, they may not have the animation polish of all the games that came out 15 years ago, but they're a lot of fun and they're very diverse. And so I think if you sort of see it in terms of just, you know, the market becoming very diversified on the bottom end, having a whole bunch of really interesting niches, that's great. But yeah, I mean, obviously for the established games industry, it is a problem and it's going to continue to be a problem. There seem to be almost no mid-level hits anymore in terms of someone made a $10 million game and it's made its money back. You're either going to get a big hit or you're going to be down with the indies. And I think that's the problem that the games industry has. I think the playing public has less of a problem because there's plenty of amazing games for them to play.
Where should people find you if they would like to hear more from you?
Sure. We're at gamediscover.co, and if you look on there, we have a newsletter, which is really for the industry, but we don't mind if non-industry people read it, and that's at newsletter.gamediscover.co. You can find us on LinkedIn as well, posting various charts about trending games and things like that. If you look for my name, Simon Carless on there. But yeah, that's where we are.
If you're the sort of person who likes to be the coolest and most forward-looking person in your group chat, I cannot recommend a newsletter more than this one, because it is the great way to always be like, oh yeah, I just casually heard about this game that's coming out next week. You've never heard of it, but it's going to be the biggest thing on the planet. I always feel like I am bringing prophecies to the world after I read a new issue. So it's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Patreon bonus: the strangest tricks for getting a game in the spotlight. Here is where we split Patreon subscribers. Simon stuck around to chat about the strangest and most audacious tricks that game creators have tried to get their game seen, including a $2,000 game with a very steep discount If you're not a patron, no worries at all. We'll go straight to the news. It is a big week for fans of arguably the most popular video game franchise in the world. Nintendo released a new Pokemon game, Pokemon Legends Z through A, or Z to A, or Z Alpha. Look, we'll talk about its reception, along with some Pokemon leaks and plenty more. So let's split up. Act 3, the news of the week. The new Pokemon is here. Pokemon Legends Z to A is the second entry in the relatively new Legends series, which drops the traditional Pokemon format into a modern, albeit contained, open world. You get to ride Pokemon, you can hurl Pokeballs from the bushes. The Legacy series, to me, feels the most of all the 3D Pokemon games, like being in this universe. So, what is the early word on Z to A? You know, it's solid. Unlike its predecessor, this one is set in present day. VGC's review claims that the real-time combat has been improved, and according to Games Radar, the story nails the chill vibes of the popular anime series. But here is the thing about Pokemon games. They tend to feel rushed and a bit lower budget than you'd expect, considering it is the biggest brand in the world. Worse, this week a purported leak of information from developer Game Freak included budget numbers suggesting that the typical Pokemon game has a budget between $12 to $20 million, a fraction of the AAA budgets that are measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And to further complicate things, these games have an audience ranging from 7-year-olds that are playing their first entry to 37-year-olds who want developer Game Freak to make big, bold changes, but also would prefer that they not tweak their favorite aspect of the game, let alone cut it. It's a tough needle to thread. And you will see all of these gripes spread out through reviews for Legends Z to A and every other Pokemon game. All of which is to say, more than perhaps any other series in video games, the best judge of whether or not you will like the latest entry is you. Which is tough because it kind of means that you need to buy the game if you want to find out. I'm sorry. Elsewhere, we're wrapping up Steam Next Fest, the semi-regular deluge of video game demos on Steam. Rather than list my favorite picks here, I've included links to stories on a ton of demos worth your time, including a folk horror board game, a horse-rearing game in the style of Death Stranding, and the new co-op game from the developers of Peak. You'll find all of that and the rest of the show notes at the free newsletter post.games or on this episode's Patreon post. And one last bit of joy. One of 2025's best games will become much easier to play for console gamers very, very soon. The Peabody winner, 1000 Times Resist, hits Xbox and PlayStation 5 on November 4th. The sci-fi adventure game from developer Sunset Visitor is about friendship, it's about grief, it's about immigration, being a teenager, being a god, and being alive right now after living through an absolutely horrible global pandemic. I spoke with its creators earlier this year for a fireside chat. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes too. And that is it for the news of the week. Y'all, that is a wrap on the Too Many Games dilemma. We learned how game creators are fighting to ensure their art be seen. Now we can all return to our decadent life of swimming in thousands of new releases. This week alone, I played the arcade version of Bubble Bobble 2, the demo for Skate Story, the modern Sega Genesis game Earthian, 2 embargoed big video game releases, Ball Pit, and of course, a little Sonic Racing Crossworlds. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Next week, in the shadow of the Colossus, For the past 20 years, the PlayStation 2 masterpiece has been the default example of video games as art. Why is that? And can a video game quite literally change the direction of someone's life? My guest has the answer to both questions. Jacob Geller is one of the most influential and experienced video game YouTube essayists, so influential that the title of one of his earliest videos, The Quiet Sadness of Mario Galaxy, has become a bit of a goof on emotionally potent YouTube videos. But Geller's criticism is no joke. He has a gift for not just finding the meaning of a work of art, but crafting just the perfect story to make his ideas stay in our brains and our hearts long after the video wraps. I will also add right here before I begin my farewell, if you want to prep for Shadow of the Colossus talk, you need to check Design Room, the new site by Matt Leone, my friend from OneUp.com a long time ago and Polygon.com more recently. He has an in-depth oral history of Shadow of the Colossus featuring so many of the key players who made that game possible. It is awesome. The project that he is doing with video game oral histories is important, and it's entertaining. It's worth checking out. But that is it for now. A reminder, post-game supporters, you get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, and usually earlier. They get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners got an extra long conversation with Simon Carless about all the strange tricks people try to pull to get their video games seen on Steam and elsewhere. Plus, each month, subscribers get a video in my ongoing series, Video Game Journalism 101. Earlier this month, we did an episode on reviews. It's probably my favorite episode so far because it's not just about video games or media, it's about how we critique the life that we live. And no ads on anything. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games. Post Games logo by James Barham. Theme by Mark Sparling. And a special thank you to this week's guest, Simon Carless. I've included a link to his newsletter, Game Discover Co., in the show notes. Like the show, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or honestly just share it with a friend. That really goes a long way. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week.